Okay, let's talk about perceived exertion, which is basically just a subjective way for you to measure how hard or the intensity of how hard you're working out. Have found over the years that it's much easier to use words and numbers. The original perceived exertion chart was on a scale of 1 to 20. Now it's sort of on a scale of 1 to 10, which makes more sense. But I found when you're trying to teach athletes, it's actually easier to just use the words. So let's go over the words. The very low level of exercise, the easy, that's what we call it. So it goes from easy to moderately hard, to hard, very hard, and then extremely hard. Okay. All of that is a scale. So it's not like driving a stick shift in a car where you're in first gear and then you're 100% in second gear and 100% in third gear. You gradually move from easy to moderate, and then you move from moderate to moderately hard, and then from moderately hard to very hard and extremely hard. And then the other interesting thing is the amount of time between easy and moderate is really quite a bit of time. There's a bigger gap to get from easy to moderate, and then as you get to the harder end of the scale, that shortens. So moderate to moderately hard, it's still a pretty good gap, but between moderately hard and hard, that range is pretty tight, and between hard and very hard, that range is even tighter. Okay, so how do you use perceived exertion? So a lot of times people they'll say they have a hard time distinguishing how it feels. So one great way to do it is you can go to a track or use one block in your neighborhood. Basically going to run about 50 yards, and you're just going to start off real easy, and then each successive distance, let's just take 50 yards, you're just going to go a little bit harder each time. Okay, and you can do this on a bike, and you can do this in the pool as well for swimming. So, and if you have a little notepad, you can make notes about how it feels. You can also do this if you have a GPS, and so then you can start to equate, what is your heart rate at a certain perceived exertion, what is your pace at a certain perceived exertion. Okay, you may need to run a little bit further than that, maybe say 200 meters on track, so half a lap on a track. But essentially you start off easy, and then you finish that one, you maybe take like 5-10 seconds rest, and then you go again, and you just go a tiny bit harder, and you just keep going a tiny bit harder each time, and it'll help you identify when it switches from easy, when it feels moderate, when it goes from moderate to feeling moderately hard, and then to hard, and so on. And then there's also, there's a lot of descriptors in between the two. So a lot of times I'll have workouts that are, between moderately hard and hard, because again, it's that graduation in there. Or it can say like moderately hard plus would be between moderately hard and hard. So moderate and everything below moderate, you should be able to have a conversation. So you should be running along and have a very fluid, steady conversation. That's how you know you're in your aerobic zone. Okay, when you get into moderately hard, is that place where most people tend to exercise, because it's a little bit harder than a little bit harder than moderate. So you think you're doing something, but it's not quite hard, so it doesn't hurt that much. But that's actually the zone that you really want to do not quite as much training in. You want to really be, the majority of your training in moderate or below, especially like warm up, cool down, long runs. And then if you're doing speed work, you want to generally be above the moderately hard. When people are new to speed work, I'll have them stay in the moderately hard zone because they're not used to working that hard. But as people get used to it and as they have experience, we'll move them up to moderately hard plus, to hard, to very hard. So let's look at like marathon pace. That's going to be more moderate because it's more aerobic. If you're an experienced marathon, you might move into the moderately hard zone. For any person doing a distance, if they're concerned about finishing the distance, they should stick in the moderate zone. Okay, even if you're doing a 5K, if you're a couch to 5K, and you've never done a 5K, stick to moderate. That way you know you're going to finish. If you're racing, let's take 5K. If you're racing and you're pushing yourself on a 5K, you're going to be, probably at least hard, and very likely very hard. If you're doing a 10K, you're going to be, in between moderately hard and hard, maybe up into the hard zone. Some elite athletes can definitely push themselves into the very hard zone. For a half marathon, you're going to be probably right around that moderately hard range and maybe moderately hard plus. But if you're doing a half marathon and you go in the first 2-3 miles and you would record that as hard, you're going to burn out, and your end of your race, you're not going to be able to sustain a hard effort for 13 miles. So again, marathon is going to be definitely more in the moderate zone. So I hope that helps. Send any questions my way. In the next couple weeks, I'm going to shoot a more extensive video on perceived exertion. We'll pull out some charts, because we can also equate these zones with heart rate numbers, as well. If you use a power meter on a bike, we can plug in power meter numbers. And we can also talk about these zones in relationship to sprint, Olympic, half Ironman, which is really similar to sort of the running analogies, the zones that I just gave a little bit. Anyway, I hope that helps. That was really quick and brief, and I'll do some more extensive videos on perceived exertion coming up. Thanks.